What's happening, everyone, and welcome to episode 2, part 1 of the Hail the Red Zone podcast, brought to you by Legacy Maker Sports Network. I'm Drew Willingham, here to bring you the latest news for the Washington Redskins. And that's right, I said part 1, because we have so much content, we had to break it down into 2 parts. So much has happened since episode 1 that we released right before the Super Bowl. Shortly after that, about 3-4 weeks after that, we had COVID-19 that came out, shut down sports, pushed back a lot of things. We had a virtual NFL draft as a result. So much has been affected by this virus. And speaking of that, hope you guys are staying safe. And for those of you who have been affected through your family and friends who've gotten sick or have passed, our hearts are out with you guys at this time throughout this crazy situation that we have going on. Today we have a lot of content that we're sharing to you through the first part of this episode, and the next part will be released tomorrow. 5 of the other guys from the Legacy Maker Sports Network are joining me as well to provide you with the information that has been brought about since the start of the offseason. So get ready. Here it comes. Get your popcorn ready. And thank you as always for tuning in. And now it's time to discuss the offseason moves for the Washington Redskins, brought to you by Drew Willingham and Tyrone Montgomery Jr. Welcome back, everyone, and please welcome Mr. Tyrone Montgomery Jr., insider for the Legacy Maker Sports Network. Ty, how are you doing?
I'm good, Drew. How about yourself, sir?
Not too bad. Just living, staying safe in this crazy times we got going on with the whole COVID-19 stuff, and lost a couple friends and family throughout, but just staying tough because it's all you can do. You got to keep on pushing through. It's definitely the craziest time I've seen, but hopefully soon we'll have sports back up, and we're going to be talking about a pretty big subject here with the off-season moves that the Redskins made. They've made some trades. They've acquired some people. They've cut a bunch of people. They've signed some people, especially some undrafted free agents. So basically just want to go through and see what your thoughts are, and we'll give our takes on what we've seen so far.
Let's rock and roll.
Awesome. So the biggest change, that the Redskins, I feel like they've made during this offseason is the coaching, because the culture is where it all had to be redone because it was so jacked up for so many years. They let go of Jay Gruden, after 5 games last year, going 0-5, and you bring in Bill Callahan. The team only improved to 3 wins, finishing 3-13. You had the rookie quarterback in there. It was such disarray going on throughout that time. But I'm just glad the one game I went to last year, they won. It was great. But it was still just like all the games that you've watched over the course of like the past 7 to 8 years, especially consistently. Like, I feel like the statistics for cardiac arrests for sports fans, Redskins are number 1 because they keep you in the game for a good portion of the game, and then it just goes right there at the end. So, but what are your thoughts on the coaching changes that have happened so far?
Like you said, it was a long time coming. Jay Gruden, he's been there for quite some time. 6 seasons, and he only had 2 winning seasons. So it was time for a change. I feel like they like the guy, but things happened, and enough is enough. They bring in Ron Rivera, and I can see a culture change, just like you said. It's very much needed, and I think they just need some sort of stability, and they need someone that is familiar with winning and playing in crucial games, and Ron Rivera is a great candidate for that.
The biggest question that's going to be the big mark over top of his head is, how is he going to do without Cam? Because Cam carried a pretty big load on the offense. I mean, Rivera was a defensive coordinator before he became a head coach, so he's a defensive-driven coach because he played defense when he played with the Chicago Bears. He even got that 1 Super Bowl with them in '85. So I'm really excited to see with the young guys like Cole Holcomb, on that defensive side, and especially just drafting Chase Young. I'm really excited to see how he does with this defense, changing it all up. You bring in Jack Del Rio, Julio and his staff. And also Rivera brings a lot of the Carolina Panthers staff along with him. And I even made this comment in episode 1 where they bring in Jeff Sagonia. And I remember playing Madden back in the early 2000s, and Jeff Sagonia, I traded for that guy for my defense. Like that, I remember that. I brought that up in the first episode. I was like, man, I'm excited that a guy that I used to trade for when I was a kid is coaching for the team now. So it's really awesome to see. But they bring a long list of changes in coaching over there, which culture-wise, it was just such a mess last year with everything going on week to week. You didn't know who the coach was going to be. Like, you didn't know who the quarterback was going to be. Ever since Alex Smith went down in 2018, it really, really just changed so much because they were in first place in the division, 6-2 or 6-3 when he went down in that horrific game against the Houston Texans. Darrell and I were there for that too. So that's why I've been to like 2 games. It's like that game. It was just sitting up in the press box and watching. I couldn't believe it. And it was like the Joe Theismann injury. They played it over and over and over again on the screen. It was rough. And whether you're a fan of the team or not, you feel bad for them because just that one guy being taken out of the game right there changed the entire season, changed the whole complexion of the next season last year too. And you see the workout video that he just put out recently. It gives you hope, but you don't want him to take another hit. So, the guys are making changes right now in the offseason to kind of help out with that. And we're about to go over that too with the battle of the number 7s. They traded for Kyle Allen from Carolina. What are your thoughts on them trading for Riverboat Ron's old quarterback in Carolina? What do you think about that?
Drew, I have mixed emotions about this because they just invested a very high draft pick in Dwayne Haskins. And ideally, you want to see what you got with him. You want to see what he brings to the table. We don't even know what he brings to the table. He hasn't even played a full season yet. So bringing Kyle Allen in, it's good in a way for insurance policy because Kyle Allen had a really good season last year. Go ahead.
Oh, my bad. No, you go ahead. You continue. My bad.
No, you're fine. But yeah, Kyle Allen had a really good season last season. So bringing him in to back up Dwayne Haskins, it's a good future investment. But I'm hoping that they don't pressure Dwayne Haskins. Give him a full season. Let him show what he can do. And if it doesn't work out, then you have Kyle Allen. But I like the pickup, but I just hope it doesn't backfire on him.
I look at it in a way, even though the Cowboys are doing it for a totally different reason with the contract status with Dak Prescott, I kind of look at it as a similar insurance policy, kind of similar like what you said. Like if Haskins goes out there and he struggles, at least you got somebody behind him who knows the system that Ron's putting in place to kind of help, get this team along, kind of be a game manager, like what they hoped to have with Case Keenum, and it didn't work out. What they did have with Alex Smith until he went down, because even though Alex Smith is doing all these different workouts now, we haven't seen him in full contact since he went down. So that's up in the air. I'm just glad the man can walk again. But with Kyle Allen, like you were saying, it's a pretty good insurance policy to have, and you just don't want them to knock the young guys' confidence because even though Dwayne Haskins is pretty young, Kyle Allen's still fairly young too. I think he's 25 or 26. He's not that old. He's been in the league for only a couple of years. Yep. So you got 2 young quarterbacks there. You got rid of Colt McCoy, who's been around. He's like, ancient at this point because he's been around for so long, and he's taken so many hard hits with Cleveland and the other teams he's been with. He's been banged up too. But to see him come back last year after he got banged up was pretty good sign too. But they did cut they cut him, they cut Josh Woodrum, so they started completely over in the quarterback category minus Dwayne Haskins. But like you said, give him a full year now. That if he starts week 1 as the quarterback, towards the end of the last season, in the last 4 games, Haskins was trending upward. He was coming back, and especially that game that Darrell and I went to, and when they played the Lions. He had that comeback victory for his first comeback victory. That was really nice to see. It goes to show that it's possibly you could see some sparks right there going up for him.
Yeah, I agree with you, Drew. I think Dwayne Haskins, just give him time and let his confidence grow, and we can see what he can do on the field. And he seems to be a leader. Looks like he's ready to win now. I seen a comment he said this offseason. I forget exactly what he said, but it's pretty much around the corner of let's go now, let's work hard now, let's win now, and let's put in this work.
Fingers crossed for him, man, because you want to see him do well, and especially him coming from Ohio State. I know Jay Quimby's going to like this. You want to see his alumni, playing very well. But, speaking of moves and things that impact the team is when we go back to the culture, another thing that was hurting the team last year was the turmoil surrounding the Trent Williams situation.
Oh, man, yeah.
It was rough. And to finally get that contract and get that guy out of there somewhere else to where he can be happy and not constantly in the headlines, a dark cloud over the team, they trade him and get a 5th-round pick for this year and a 3rd-round pick for next year. How do you think that's going to fare for the team going forward?
I think it was the right thing to do. Get rid of the mold, get rid of that, and keep him happy. And you're happy in the end because you were pretty much wasting a roster spot at the end of the day. I mean, he didn't play at all last season. He's a Pro Bowler. I mean, he's worth a lot. He brings a lot to any team that he plays for, and the Redskins missed him last season. So, in order to trade him and you get a 5th-round pick in this past year's NFL draft, and you get a 3rd-round pick for next year's draft, I think it's a win-win situation for both sides here.
The team tried to supplement that roster spot with Donald Penn last year. He was 36 years old, and kind of like what I said with Colt McCoy earlier, he was pretty ancient coming to this team, coming from the Oakland Raiders and the Tampa Bay Bucks from all those years playing. And you just saw every time he got on the line that there were so many gaps that were wide open and guys were coming through and nailing the quarterback. It was hard to watch because the Trent Williams was there and healthy and the morale was up like it used to be. They wouldn't have gotten through there like that.
Exactly.
So it was hard to watch that part of it all. But speaking of trades, you got Kyle Allen and you've got Trent Williams and all. The team signed some pretty big names. Were there ones in your mind that stick out that you think will make a pretty big impact this year?
Signings this year. There wasn't any major signings in my opinion, but adding weapons is always good. And I look at Darius Geis, a guy like him. He's been banged up just about his entire season. There was a game last season I watched him, and he had a pretty good game. I think he only had maybe about 10 or 12 carries, and he had over 100 yards.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if you remember that game, but bringing him in, he's a guy that's a guy of your future, and I feel like he's the future back in Washington. And if he's healthy, that's an addition right there in itself. But I think that'll help y'all out a lot. Just the fact of being healthy.
That's the biggest question mark right there is staying healthy, which, when you get banged up, especially at, you're that young and your knees are already falling apart. He's had, I think that his knee injury he had last year was in the opposite knee that he had surgery on the year before. So he's had double knee surgeries, in both knees. And he's not even 20, he's like 25, 26 too at that, if that old, like that says a lot. And then you got, AP, who's in his final year of his deal, will this be his swan song this year? Will he? So. I think so too. I don't know how they're going to use him. They brought him back for another year. We may next year be talking about off-season moves with him and not coming back. But, the ones that really stick out for me, as far as their moves that they made were Michael Ledecky, the guard they signed. I think he came from Tampa Bay, but they signed him for a 1-year deal, which they need all the help they can get on that offensive line. That's going to be a big move. One that I'm really interested to see, who is an undrafted free agent from the LSU National Champions, Thaddeus Moss, the son of Hall of Famer Randy Moss. If he is a fraction of what Randy Moss was, that's going to be a steal of a pickup for the Redskins right there. And he's not known for, being fast or versatile or even his hands. He's known for blocking. So the last blocking tight end the Redskins really, truly had, Jordan Reed, you can make it an argument for, but he was always banged up. The last one that I really think of that made a really big impact on the offensive line for tight ends was Chris Cooley, and it's been, almost 10 years since he was at his prime, since he was blocking for the
You're taking
Lions.
this back, Drew.
I'm
Jesus
taking us
Christ.
back, man.
Time machine, boy.
We can go on the time machine to start talking Super Bowls too, because it's been 3 decades, but I'm not going to go there today. But the team definitely was very, very busy this offseason, and they lost a lot. They let people declare as free agents. They cut a bunch of people. Jordan Reed was a very big one too, who we just mentioned. Very, very concussion-based career over the course of the past 4 or 5 seasons. It cut his career possibly short, because he hasn't been signed anywhere else. I don't know if he's going to go anywhere else. He's just not healthy enough to play.
Yeah, I think he should hang it up.
Yeah, he made a lot of money the past few years not doing much. So
and the bad thing about it, he was a really good player.
He was.
Athletic as can be, good route runner, good hands. He was solid, but just the fact that he wasn't able to stay healthy is scary for him and his family, and scary for the Redskins organization too.
And the Redskins, along with losing him, they lost Paul Richardson too. They let him go. So there's going to be a lot of new faces on this offense this year. Defensive wise, not too much, but offensive wise, I think we're going to see a major difference of not just personnel but production.
I agree, and I think Redskins also brought in a guy that I'm familiar with from Philadelphia, Ronald Darby.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't do too well in Philadelphia, but a lot of that wasn't his fault. A lot of that was our coaching in Philadelphia. So I feel like playing under a guy like Vinny Del Negro, not Vinny Del Negro, Jack Del Rio, playing under a guy like him, I feel like that'd be beneficial for him and for the Redskins.
Yeah, because, when you look back on it, Ron Rivera and Del Rio have actually coached 3 potential Hall of Fame, but very, very impactful players on the defensive side. You got Von Miller, Khalil Mack, and Julius Peppers. That all 3 of them have combined to coach. They've combined to coach all 3 of them, and look at the careers those guys have had. So if they can have any type of impact on that with Holcomb and Kerrigan and Young especially, and then you got Landon Collins back there, which he needs to be rejuvenated. This could be a nasty defense. They finished, at the very bottom of the list last year in defense, but, who's to say they might at least be top 15 this year in defense?
Yeah, that'd be good. A lot of changes this offseason for this team, so it could be a huge turnaround. And we're not expecting a Super Bowl appearance, but like you said, baby steps. If they can get from 6 wins this year, that'd be great.
It's definitely going to be exciting to see, and I look forward to it as the months go on, just to see how this this virus that we've had going around, how that impacts things. I hope that September 13th, when the season starts on paper, that we can actually get out there and see these things live and talk to everybody about it. We'll find a way, one way or another, to still do what we do, but it's just going to be tough if they can't let the fans get in to see this, because around that time it starts to cool down. So we'll see what's going on between now and then. But it's definitely just been fun to get back in and talk sports again. And I greatly appreciate you taking the time to get on here with me on this episode, and we'll get on these more down the road.
Sounds good to me, brother.
And now it's time to discuss the expired contracts for the Washington Redskins, brought to you by Drew Willingham and LaMonte Thomas. Welcome back, everyone. I'm joined by Legacy Maker Sports Network insider LaMonte Thomas, also co-host of the Commonwealth Sports Talk podcast with Joe Diller, that you can see on anchor.fm as well as on Facebook and other social media platforms. LaMonte, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, D. Willie. How you doing, man? It's good to be on. I'm glad you have me on with you.
Doing great, man. I'm glad you're doing great. With all this crazy stuff we've had going on for the past 2 months, I'm glad we're all alive and well, and that we get to have a little fun, on this episode today.
Absolutely.
So, basically what we're going to be talking about today is the expired contracts that the Redskins have had, the ones that just expired since the 2020 season, along with the ones who only have 1 year remaining on their deals, what we think could possibly happen, whether they'll ride out the contract, whether the team will re-sign them or restructure their deals, or possibly trade them. And starting out, LaMonte, let's get your takes on the expired contracts from the 2020 season.
All right. So as far as expired contracts, we have a few interesting things going on in the offensive line. So Donald Penn is the first one that comes to mind. He's going to be a free agent. I do believe that with the Redskins signings or drafted Sadiq Charles, out of LSU, that plays the same position. He's still going to be a good person to keep on, only because you got that veteran leadership. And I think that, they're going to want to keep him to maybe groom Charles while he's getting his feet under him. So I say that they'll re-sign Donald Penn. You've got Michael Burton, the fullback, who is now a New Orleans Saint, 1 year, $1 million deal. So he's gone. You got Eric Flowers again on that offensive line, plays tackle. He is now Miami Dolphin. He got a 3-year, $30 million deal, which actually saved the Redskins quite a deal of money there. You got John Bostic, the inside linebacker, who is re-signed. So 2-year, $5 million deal for Bostic. So he's going to remain in that 4-3 system the Redskins are now going to have. You got Josh Woodrum, quarterback, is going to be a free agency, and I think they're going to let him go with all that quarterback carousel going on there in Washington. Going to find a decent backup, and who knows, even to compete maybe with Dwayne Haskins and Allen there. You got Nate Orchard, defensive end, with all the talent on that front seven for the Redskins. He still has a $1 million deal, so they inked him again just to see if he can provide some stability to this line here while it's loaded. You got Case Keenum, quarterback, is now a Cleveland Brown, 3-year, $18 million deal there. You got Tony Bergstrom, the center, who is a free agent. Now, the thing with the Redskins is that they drafted Keith Ishmael, so I believe they may lose Bergstrom free agency now that they got a young guy who's coming in, and they're going to try to develop him to take his place. You have running back Wendell Smallwood, and he's going to be, of course, that they acquired from the Eagles. He's going to be a free agent, and I believe that with all the running backs in that room there, he may find a nice deal to go somewhere else, similar to the next person on the list, which is Chris Thompson, who's now a Jacksonville Jaguar. He's a 1-year deal there.
That was a pretty big move. I think that's going to be a sleeper move for Jacksonville.
Yeah, they were thinking that Rivera might want to use him sort of like in the way that he did with McCaffrey. He had 10 receiving touchdowns in his 6 years with the Redskins. He was really good out of the backfield as far as in the passing game, but he's now gone. You have Miles Humphrey is a defensive end. I believe he's gonna go to another team there. I mean, especially if they just re-signed who was the last defensive end? Orchard. They just re-signed him, and I'm thinking that, well, if they re-signed him, then there's not going to be a lot more room for more of that front seven. So Humphrey probably will go to another team, in my opinion. Paul Richardson, the wide receiver, he was cut. He will sign somewhere else.
He was pretty banged up the past couple of years too. He came to Washington, on the high hopes from Seattle, and he couldn't stay healthy. Like that was the only bad. He's got a lot of talent. He just couldn't stay healthy, and the team paid him a lot of money to be on IR a good portion of the time. So that was really it was really unfortunate.
Absolutely, he's the speedster, so of course he's always going to have a high upside. But I think that they're going to move on from. Well, they did move on from him, so we'll see what happens. On that receiver slot, you got Trayvon Hester, the defensive tackle, who's now a Green Bay Packer. Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie, cornerback. I believe he's gonna sign elsewhere. Again, a speedster, got hurt. They couldn't use him. He was supposed to be there to provide some veteran stability, but that didn't happen. You have Jerome Cunningham, a tight end. I believe he's going to find another home elsewhere. Of course, Colt McCoy's a Giant now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys throughout the NFL that went to rival teams, I guess, to kind of stick it to the other team to let them go. But
Yeah.
some names that you mentioned throughout that list, like Donald Penn and Colt McCoy and all these guys, that are veteran guys that have been around for some time. Donald Penn, a lot of people know came in last year because of the whole Trent Williams situation. He wasn't going to
Right.
play. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? All this stuff going on with the whole medical staff. Donald Penn comes in. They're hoping he'd fill the void. And Donald Penn, I think he was 35 or 36 at the time, so he might even just hang it up at this point. He, like you said, he could come in for some veteran leadership because the Redskins did make some moves between the draft and free agency to where they need somebody with some veteran presence to kind of help these guys along. The question is does Donald Penn want to go through another training camp? Does he want to put himself out there? Because you could definitely see the age with him on the offensive line last year. The plays that Trent Williams would have made 2 years ago when he was playing and solidifying those gaps in the line, Donald Penn just wasn't doing it. The other team was moving him all over the place last year. So
Yeah, it was kind of tough for him. I mean, but like you said, he was there. He was
yeah.
there, and I think if he does come back, it will be the Redskins. You have a good point there. If he doesn't come back, I think we'll see the last of him in the league.
Yeah,
But
because
as far as
a lot of these guys that you mentioned, like, that they haven't been signed yet, that are still kind of up in the air, like a lot of this wouldn't be a factor if it wasn't for the whole COVID-19 thing. Like that slowed down a lot of the process. Like
yeah, it did.
your top half of your list of players have been taken, of course, but the other half that would have been figured out now by May or end of May or early June, there's still half of that list out there just because you can't get training sessions with these guys. There's no type of reps they can get. There's nothing you can see. There's no film or anything to show, except for Alex Smith recently to show his workout video, which I'm really happy for him. I just don't want him to take a hit. I
Yeah,
really don't want to see him take a hit. Like I want to see him make a
yeah.
comeback and be the first guy to do it, but I'm really, really skeptical about that at the same time. I don't think we're going to see him suited up this year.
Yeah, it was a real good thing for Redskins Nation to see Alex Smith out there. Yeah, for sure. And you're right. Ever since COVID-19, things have been moving abnormally slow.
Yeah.
For this process. As far as Donald Penn goes, though, that they are also keeping Brandon Sheriff. He
Yeah.
signed his tender, so
His franchise tag. Yeah. Yeah.
he signed his tender, so that's $15 million right there for this upcoming season. So they do have him, and he's a solidified guy. You're talking about somebody who's multiple Pro Bowls. He's been there for the Redskins, through thick and thin. So they still have him. So that's good news.
Yeah, like it's there's a long list of those guys of expired contracts that they let go, or guys that they've brought in and signed. But another back part of this that we have is the guys whose contracts end at the upcoming season, at the end of the 2020 season, not pre-2020 like we were just talking about. But
Right.
you got guys like Ryan Kerrigan, who's still fairly young. I want to say 30, 31 years old, still fairly young. He can get one more good contract in him. He wants to stay in DC. He's been there ever since he was drafted. He doesn't want to go anywhere. He's got a young family. He wants to keep them in the same area. They got to get a deal done for him. I don't see him going anywhere else unless the signing talks go south. You've got Adrian Peterson, who's up there in age. This could be his swan song this year. This could be it for him, depending on how things go. If he trends upwards with his production, last year kind of took a little bit of a dive, but with everything going on with the culture and the coaching and everything, you can't really fault him but so much. He still looked pretty good when the offensive line was blocking for him. But that's another guy that we need to talk about in this upcoming part of this segment is the expiring contracts. What are your thoughts with some of these big key guys that have 1 year left on their deal, and what do you think are going to happen with them?
Yeah, it's very interesting that you mentioned these guys. Ryan Kerrigan is a guy that Ron Rivera was asked about him, and he said that he believes that Kerrigan is going to be in his plans for the future of this team. He's really excited about all the young guys they have on the defensive line. He is adamant about Ryan Kerrigan moving forward with this team. So it looks like it's a good relationship that, as long as everything, like you said, nothing goes south, that he's going to be a part of the Redskins plans. 31 years old. he's a Redskins guy. He's a fan. The fans love him. So
kind of like Luke Kuechly was in Carolina with Ron Rivera. Maybe not as dynamic of a force as Kuechly was, because he put it all out there on the field, which is why he kind of had to retire.
Absolutely.
The wheels got ran off of him, but Kerrigan's still fairly healthy and can still produce and be a leader for that defense. They've got to keep him.
Yeah, he's one sack away from the franchise record. So how about that? So it's you gotta let him do it. Go for it at least.
He's gonna get it. He's gonna get it this year.
He's gonna get it this year. It's no set. And then after that, it's like, well, he becomes a brand guy. You kind of want to keep him on. But Rivera's excited about him. So I think he stays. As far as Adrian Peterson's concerned, I think the big question will be whether he's done with football altogether or not. You're talking about a legend, man. Like this guy, nobody thought he was going to come back from that injury. He comes back. He proves it to everyone, and being here in Washington, man, he's been nothing but, a pure professional, So after this season, we'll see. They have a lot of things going on in the running back room in D.C. We just talked about, Smallwood, Chris Thompson going to be gone. Darius Geis, we haven't had him for a full season yet. We're hoping we see what that looks like because, he showed some good some promise when he was in there and was healthy.
In the previous segment, Ty and I were just talking about Darius Geis. That one game that he had right before he got hit hard he had like 10 carries for over 100 yards. I mean, he's dynamic of a force when he's healthy, but the only downfall with that was he had that knee injury in college or whatnot, and then he comes out, and then the other knee injury he had was in the opposite knee. So he's had two pretty big knee surgeries on both knees. So it's a big question mark over Geis, which is why I think they went with the draft pick that they went this year in the third round, which Russ and I will talk about here in a little bit. But it's just so many question marks over that running back, game that, we just don't know because AP, one more year possibly. Geis, we don't know what's going to happen with his recovery. He looked great when he recovered from the first injury, and now he came back last year, got hurt again. We haven't seen him because, training camps and OTAs and everything have been down because of this whole COVID-19 thing. So there's so many question marks over the whole running back game.
Yeah, it's a hard call for him, man, because people were already starting to talk about, oh, well, is he injury prone? Is he not? I'm telling you what, I covered that game at the Jets last year, and they threw a screen pass to him, and he took off. And just seeing the energy, like he took it all the way to the house. I believe it was called back.
Like a little spark plug. Yeah, he took off.
Like, yeah. When you see that, you're like, well, he belongs here. So I don't know, man. It's going to be a tough call. Like you said, we'll have to see how the recovery goes, and, We'll see.
I'm really excited, like you were talking about with Penn with the veteran presence. Like I'm really excited to see how AP factors into that with these young guys this year, because you could see in interviews where guys were talking about seeing his work ethic and how he approaches the game and how structured he is. If that type of motivation can rub off to these young running backs, we may see a bad force in the next few years with this team and the running back situation.
Yeah, definitely, man. And there's guys still on the list that you're talking about, and it's going to be a very interesting season for the Redskins because they got a bunch of veterans, on 1-year deals to go along with all these young guys they have coming in, and it seems like the right mix. On paper it looks good. We just got to see what it's going to look like when they roll that product out.
And out of all the expiring contracts that we're talking about here, there's one guy, one dynamic force of this team that we've kind of left out so far. The team didn't pick up the 5th-year option for Reuben Foster. What are your thoughts of this team not picking up his 5th-year option of his rookie deal?
Yeah, that's interesting there because Reuben Foster goes down, last year, and there's people who picked up the slack. I mean, you had people like Ryan Anderson, is now ready. He's ready to go. He did pretty well. You got people like Thomas Davis that they signed from the Chargers. That this guy, crazy. You're talking about a guy who has had 3 ACL tears, and now he's 37 years old. He seems like he's invincible, man. He comes back from that. He's the only active player, Drew, defensively from the 2005 draft when you and I graduated high school. How about that?
Wow, you're definitely digging some facts right there. Yeah,
Dang,
but
how
yeah,
about that?
he's an old guy, especially in football terms. Especially old to take as much beating as he has and had those amount of surgeries and be 37 and come back. That's definitely a good one to throw out there too. I'm interested to see how he plays a part in this team this year.
Yeah, I mean, over 100 combined tackles. He's a guy he's a proven guy. He's a Ron Rivera type of guy. You know what I mean? So that's interesting. But yeah, Foster, I don't know. It's like you said, he's been a force. It's just a matter of how he's going to fit with the scheme and what the Redskins see in him this year.
I'm definitely excited to see it too, and that the team made some upgrades, with the offensive line, and I even include the tight end as part of the offensive line because they're blocking tight ends, from the most part, and they let go of Sprinkle, and they made some moves to increase the productivity of that position because the team hasn't really had, besides Jordan Reed, who they also cut this year, which was a long time coming with all the concussions he had. He was kind of a blocking tight end. He was a little tough as nails before the concussions took over. But the last time the team has had a really good blocking tight end, and I'm going to go back for a reach too, would be probably about 10 years when they had Chris Cooley. That was the last time they had somebody that actually could play the position, but also make an impact on that offensive line for blocking. So it's going to be really interesting with the people that they decided to let go so far and the ones who they have a long list of expiring contracts that we've started to go through for the upcoming season. It's going to be interesting to see who they bring back.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, it's going to be a mix. Rivera is he's really particular about his personnel. So we're going to see how these guys mesh. You got the young guys. He's brought in some vets that are doing well. I mean, there's even some hometown favorites. I mean, the free safety Sean Davis from Pittsburgh. He's a Maryland guy. You know what I mean? He went to the University of Maryland from PG County, Maryland. Right there goes to high school, Merritt High School. He's back in the Washington Redskins uniform. And how nostalgic is that? If he plays well, people wrote him off after he got hurt in Pittsburgh, and now he has a chance to prove himself and be at home. Those type of deals right there, that's what makes a solidified roster. So the Redskins are doing their due diligence in that.
It looks like, for the first time in quite some time, that the coach and the GM have actually been making the decisions for the team. Like the ownership has kind of just did this number and backed out of it. And that's good to see because, as you've seen and with other teams in Dallas and other teams where, and like Cincinnati too, where the ownership is very, very involved in, the player personnel decisions, it's not going their way. And, for the Redskins, it's been the same deal up until recently too, which is, a big part of why they really haven't been that successful over the past 3 decades.
Yeah, true. You got some utmost football guys in Ron Rivera. Even his staff, like everybody talks about him as a personnel guy. He's so personal. Carolina hated to see him go. It's one of those things. I mean, 15 in one season there. We could talk about a few plays different, with the Denver Broncos in the Super Bowl, and who knows,
Mm-hmm. It's gonna be a really big question mark with that. But I mean, with Carolina, they had so many different changes where they had a new owner because Jerry Richardson was out because of that whole scandal. He was the one who hired Ron Rivera. So the new owner, David Tepper, was looking to change it up a little bit and start fresh. And Ron Rivera was like peace, and then brought like 75% of his coaching staff with him to Washington. So like you said, he's a big player personnel guy, and he proved that by bringing a good portion of his staff with him to Washington.
Yeah, he did. And, even players that he's kept up with, and that's one of those things. It's really interesting to see that he even brought there's a linebacker that he brought with him that played with Kuechly in college. So, it's Pierre Lewis. That's the guy. Yep. He brings him over. And it's one of those things where it's like, wow, I see what you did there. Once you look at it and you look at the track record, none of these moves are by accident. He brings Pierre Lewis, who, played linebacker with Kuechly. It's a mind game. He's like, okay, if I can't have Kuechly, I'm going to have a guy who's been there and seen the work that he's put in, maybe got some things from him too.
Whether I was a fan of this team or not, I would I would be excited for the fans of this team and for this team in general, just because of the moves they've made. These are the moves and the things they've been meaning to do for quite some time, and it's just good to kind of sit back and actually see it get done for a change. So
Yeah, I hear you, man. It's something to be excited about.
kind of like how, with your team, with the Broncos throughout, the 2000s, they had a little bit of a slump, but they were still kind of in it. Plummer kind of kept them in it. It wasn't until, Orton and all of them started being played in the mix, and then the whole Tebow thing, to where you kind of guys took the roller coaster ride. You had a
Oh
slight taste
man.
of what Redskins fans have gone through, a slight taste, not quite as bad, because you haven't had the seasons, but
Yeah.
you've been a part of a roller coaster ride similar to that, and it's just I'm just, my fingers are crossed that for not just myself but all other fans of this team out there, that this is the beginning of some really, really good things to come.
Yeah, and being around the Redskins organization for a while, being in this area, I've lived in Maryland for about 6 years when I was up getting my master's degree, and it's one of those things as a sports fan, you almost you get that feeling that you want to see them win because of what they've been through, and their story, and you still have fans that back them after this whole thing, and it's like it's part of a community. So you can't help but to want to see the up and up and the good side of a franchise who's been through some things, and they're still climbing, they're still here, and their fan base and all their stakeholders are still here for them.
And when you put everything that you just said into context, and you think about what this fan base has gone through over the course of the past 30 years, and the emotions that go along with it, I guarantee you one thing, and I'm not really 100% right on facts, but I bet you, as far as statistics of cardiac arrest goes, the Redskins fans are up there as number one because of all that they've been through over the past 30 years. Because they keep you in it for the first three quarters, and all of a sudden it just implodes in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, there may be some interesting hypertension facts to go along with that, Drew. For sure.
Ease up on the cold ones.
Man, we've all been there, man. We've all been
Yeah.
there.
So, but man, I greatly appreciate you taking the time to jump on here with us and discuss the expiring contracts and kind of go over a few other little things. And we look forward to doing this again, in episodes to come. And again, guys, definitely check out Commonwealth Sports Talk with LaMonte Thomas and Joe Dillard on Facebook and on Anchor.fm. And of course, Lamonte's articles that he writes for the Legacy Maker. And hopefully soon, sports and everything else will open back up so we can provide you some more behind the scenes footage of what goes on in the sports world.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it. It's always good to catch up with you, man.
And now it's time to discuss the NFL draft recap for the Washington Redskins 2020 draft, brought to you by Drew Willingham and Russ Taliaferro. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, please welcome Legacy Maker Sports Insider. Just like myself, a professional wrestling fan for a very, very long time. And of course, the stat man of the Legacy Maker Sports Network. He is my man to my left, Russ Taliaferro. Russ, how are you doing today?
So I meet you to the right. I'm doing all right.
My man. Yeah, you're to my left and I'm to your right. But today
So like, am I facing the right direction right now?
No, your other right.
Okay, we'll try this. I'm gonna say this the whole time.
Oh man, this is gonna be fun. We have a really, really fun segment to talk about. This whole entire episode has been fun for me getting to talk with all five of you guys, and today, with you, we get to talk about the NFL draft picks that the Redskins had this year. They had 8 draft picks that they had. Some of them they acquired by trades, but the main one that we'll talk about for a few minutes will be their first overall pick that they had. They were number 2 overall in the draft this year in the first round. And with that pick, they take edge rusher out of Ohio State, Chase Young, who had a very, very large upside. There was so much hype around him going into this draft. What are your thoughts on them taking him with the second overall pick?
It was the obvious pick because there's so much talent there. There's so much actual young moldability, if that makes any sense. I might have just made up a word. I don't know. But like, there's not much to mold even with that because he's almost perfect as is. And I hate saying that because I don't want to curse him. But like the only thing I can think of is not to knock off on Chase Young is just his pass rush, not pass rush, but his run stopping ability. But like that comes with time. But with how far advanced he is in his pass rush ability and it's just raw strength and ability to actually get to the passer, it's the run stopping ability will come along with no time, and I'm not worried about it at all. Especially with him joining that D line and that front seven overall, with them going back to a 4-3, it's the perfect pick for them to put at a left end rush end for the next 10 to 15 years.
You're right. And I mean, he's a physical specimen at 6'5", 264 pounds. I mean, he's got 10-inch hands, 33 3/4, length arms. He's got some pythons, he's got literally 33-inch pythons. This guy is a beast. I mean, last year, the Redskins pick up Cole Holcomb. They got Montez Sweat in the first round. They've got a defense around them, a very young core defense. You round that out with Ryan Kerrigan, the veteran presence, is in his early 30s. 1 year left on his deal. He's got a lot to play for. I think that this team, if they have a full entire 16-game season, this team's going to go from very bottom of the pack of the league. I'm predicting them to go in the top 15 of the league this year. Their record won't reflect that, unfortunately. Their offense, I don't feel like is going to be much of an improvement this year. They still have a lot to learn with that. But when you bring in Jack Del Rio's defensive style, the fact that Ron Rivera was a defensive player, and you put those two guys together, who coached Von Miller, Julius Peppers, and Khalil Mack between the two of them, that this defense is going to be a nasty defense within the next 5 years. If they keep this coaching staff together and they don't give up, it's going to be very interesting to see what they can pull off with this defense.
That's definitely something to think about. Like the way they were looking at it this year, I would say the draft, going into the draft, what needed the most help, in my opinion, was probably the offense. But with the talent that you have at the top of the draft, you can't help but improve the defense with the talent like Chase Young.
And, speaking of offense, and we'll kind of use that as our momentum to roll into our next pick. Our next pick that the Redskins took wasn't in the second round. They didn't have a second-round pick this year, but they had a third-round pick. For the 66th overall selection, they take a running back / wide receiver because he's versatile enough to be labeled as both. They pick up Antonio Gibson from Memphis. What do you think about that pickup there in the third round? Do you think it was a steal on their part for that?
I think it was, I wouldn't say a steal. I think it was the epitome of a third-round pick, like someone who can come in, kind of be a package player almost. But it depends on what position they're going to use him in, which I guess, is essential package player. Like, he's listed, I think he went to the combine, worked out as, or at least at the combine time, he's listed as a wide receiver. But he played running back at Memphis. So, like, in my eyes, I see this as, like, a taller Chris Thompson replacement since he left and followed Jay Gruden. Just, like, someone versatile that can come out of the backfield but doesn't need to be in the backfield at the same time. So it's, like, I like the pick just for the weaponry. Now, like, had they had a second pick, I would have liked them to pick a wide receiver. But at the same time, I think they did the best really kind of what they could at the moment.
Okay, now I'm going to go similar with that, but I'm about to get real serious with you Redskins fans as you look into this. I'm about to do something especially different. I'm taking off my glasses and getting into super real mode here. The Redskins have what? Like 24 running backs right now? They have a lot of running backs. It's gotten real serious when it comes to that. However, Chris Thompson is gone, like Russ just said. He's in Jacksonville. But you also have AP. You got Darius Geis. They let go of Smallwood. They've picked up some other running backs too. There is a very, very, very big question mark when it comes to the running back situation. Because AP, he's up there in age. He's got 1 year left on his contract. He has a lot to prove this year if he's going to play football anymore after this year. He's got some records to chase, but we don't know if he's motivated to play anymore after this year. You got Darius Geis, who has had 2 major knee operations on both knees. I mean, this guy has been through a lot. He had the knee operation right out of college. He had a knee operation, after his first year in the league. He got banged up last year. This guy, you don't know what you're going to get. So for them to make this move in the third round, this was a must-make move here. They had to get somebody who not only can play running back, but they had to get somebody who can do the screen pass game, who can catch balls, who can run routes, who can make a difference with not just running the ball. You could also potentially, I haven't seen him in blocking action, but you could also possibly line him up as fullback and have him block too. He's got the size for it. The last time the Redskins had a very, very good, versatile fullback that they played, they could run the ball, they could catch the ball, they could block. And I'm going to go on a reach here too, and I've said this at another point in this episode too, was Liddell Betts. Liddell Betts was the last time that they had somebody like this that could be this versatile. So for the Redskins to pick up somebody like this in the third round, I'm not going to go as far as to say it was a steal, but you know what? I'll at least grade it as a B+. I will give them a B+ for this pick in the third round. In the fourth round, we're still on the offense with their next pick. They had 2 picks in the fourth round, one of them being via trade. But, with their first selection in the fourth round, it was the 108th overall pick. They take an offensive tackle from the LSU national champions, Sadiq Charles, who won a national championship, like I just said. What were your thoughts on them taking him in the fourth round?
I am a big fan of offensive linemen, period. So I'm not going to say, it's a bad pick to pick one that won a national championship. And I feel like what they need, especially now after losing Trent Young, is a left tackle. So, yeah, they had to wait until the fourth round to get it, but I think it was a pretty good one, especially if he, God forbid, if he doesn't work out as a left tackle, because I think that's where they're going to put him. Because he started the left tackle as a sophomore in LSU. He was suspended a little bit during his he was suspended a little bit during his junior season, but still started left tackle towards the end of the year when they were winning the national championship last season. But he still came back, like I said, and started at left tackle for the national championship for the national championship team. So he's a decently proven left tackle in college, and maybe that doesn't always line up, but I think he's got the size, 6'4", 320. 33-inch arms, 10-inch hands, so he's got hands to put on the pads, not, put him in the wrong spot, of course. But, they need the help. And the one thing I like about offensive linemen is the versatility. Because you can still, even if he somehow, God forbid, doesn't work as a tackle, you can move him inside and play him as guard, too.
You're right. I mean, the biggest thing, like you just said, is with them losing Trent Williams, they had to draft somebody who could, potentially take his place at some point. Will he be a starter right away on the offensive line? We can't guarantee that. I mean, he's not a first-round pick. We can't make those type of assumptions right now without really seeing him in OTAs and in action and training camp. But I think somewhere down the road, this was a type of pick that you had to make for this team, because Trent Williams, the dark cloud that was over this team over the past 2 seasons, played a very big part in how the culture went in the locker room and how these players were handling themselves and how the coaching staff was managing things. I mean, even the medical staff, since the medical staff was one of the main reasons why Trent Williams was doing what he did. Now that you trade him away, he's gone, you start fresh. And the biggest thing that the Redskins have had is a problem with that offense for years now is the offensive line. They bring back Brandon Sheriff. They franchise tagged him. He's definitely going to play a very big role in keeping that line solidified. But Charles may be somebody who may sneak under the radar and be a starter on that tackle spot of the line. We don't know whether it'll be the left side or the right side, but I guarantee you that one of their undrafted free agents at some point will be playing alongside him, and we'll get into that here once we finish talking about the picks, our sleepers for the undrafted free agents that they picked up. But, they also had another 4th-round pick this year too that, many would say is a sleeper. But before we get that, I want to at least do one thing with Charles. What do you think that their grade is for their Charles pick? How would you grade that?
Personally, I would give that one I give at least a solid B, just because of what they need at the time in the 4th round and the value that was available. It was at least a B minus to me, because they needed the left tackle, they need the left guard to, I guess, counter what you said. They do need help on the line, but it's more of the left side. because the right side's been pretty much shored up for the last 5 years with Scherf and Morgan and Moses. It's the center, and even the center's been pretty shored up. It's really just the left guard and left tackle right now that is the obviously glaring need for the Redskins. And he can play either one, left guard or left tackle. And it's just how quickly they can bring him up. So, like, I would give it a B. I think he's got the ability to play. He just needs to be coached right. And hopefully we can get these OTAs, underway soon so he can get used to, the playbook and everything.
Yeah, because his virtual rookie mini camps, he can't learn but so much, doing like with what we're doing through like a Zoom call. If a whole team of rookies is talking to one of their coaches on there, I mean, of course you can learn the playbook and take this time to study plays and stuff, but you actually need to get the momentum and the footwork and all these other things worked out, and your timing, all these different things worked on during what they would normally be doing during this time frame. But as far as my grade, we're not too far off as far as how we grade it, but I'm going to go with a C+. I'm not 100% sold on him, except, and I'll admit it, I'm not as big of a college football fan as I am an NFL fan. So I don't know but so much about Sadiq Charles, except for the national championship game and a couple games leading up to that, like in the playoffs and everything. So I can't really grade him but so much. I'm going to go with a C+ until, like you said, we see OTAs in training camp and preseason and these different little things that can show me what this guy's really made of and how he can adapt to professional football. This next pick that they had in the fourth round, like I said, they had 2 picks this year in the fourth round, and with the 142nd overall pick towards the end of the fourth round, they could have gotten potentially the steal of the draft. And I may be taking a reach with this, but they may have gotten the steal of the draft right here at the wide receiver position. They take Antonio Gandy Golden out of Liberty. Now, this is somebody that you can refresh our viewers on how this guy plays. What are your thoughts about this fourth round, pick that they just got?
I think it's a great pick. I'll be honest, because they need the weapons at wide receiver. Mm-hmm. Now, with himself, he's not the cleanest route runner. I'll say that, as you'd expect from a fourth round pick, but he's got the size and the ability to separate at the line. It's just what he does after that is where he needs to work on it. So I think the more comfortable he gets with the quarterback and the playbook, the better it is for him. Because, like, he's 6'4", in the 220 range with over 9.5-inch hands with almost 32-inch arm length. So he's got the size. And he, like, when we saw him, I know me and Darrell covered one of his game when Liberty came to UVA in 2018. Mm-hmm. He only had maybe about 2 or 3 catches that game, but you could tell which one's him. But not just by his jersey number, but by his size. So his presence there, once you develop the actual talent, will be a big factor with their offense, especially if, McLaren can get going, if Sims can get going, if they can get some work out of their tight ends as well, depending on what kind of weaponry they can work out there. A 6'4" wide receiver is the epitome of a red zone target.
No, you're right. You took the words right out of my mouth. Like, literally, I was about to say that the 6'4" with his size, he's literally a red zone target. I mean, he's got speed that could really surprise defenders. I mean, it's been besides McLaurin last year, it's been quite a while since the Redskins have had a speedster who's that young. I mean, they've had, flashes of different guys, and they brought in Paul Richardson hoping that was going to be the case, but now he's gone. He just couldn't stay healthy. They've had other receivers in the past that they've brought in through free agency or trades that, they believed would be their speedster on the offense. But it's been a while since they've actually drafted somebody with that type of speed. And now this could be 2 years in a row that the Redskins have gotten really good wide receivers towards the middle of their draft picks in the entire draft that could turn out to be star players for this team for the next 4 to 5 years. So with them getting him from Liberty, not too far away from DC, not the closest, but also not too far away at the same time, they bring in somebody that could potentially make a big splash on this offense this year and for years to come. Who knows?
Yeah, for sure. Like, when you were saying that, the name that popped in my head is the last, like, pure speed guy that I remember the Redskins actually having was probably Santana Moss, and that's like 10 plus years ago. And that's the first thing that popped into my head because I remember watching him as a Giants fan. I was like, that son of a gun is fast.
And they picked him up from the Jets.
And
they picked him up from the Jets.
They did.
Yeah. So when you
And we
really
had
go
his little
back and
brother in New York for a little bit.
yeah, and when you really think about it, like I said, except for McLaurin last year and, with him this year, there's not many people you can really think off the top of your head that's got this much upside that have come out of the draft for this team. They've had to make trades for guys who've already been in the league for 4 to 5 years to get this type of talent. And they don't really have them for long enough because by the time they get them, they have them for a few years and then the wheels have been run off of them. So now they get, they've got 2 young guys with McLaurin and with him that, they're fresh, they're young, they've got plenty of football left in them that we could see for years to come in DC. And with all that said, and now it comes down to time to grading this steal that we think that this team picked up. I'm going with an A+ for Gandy Golden in this 4th round pick with their 4th overall pick in the draft. I mean, with all that we just said, he's got a lot of upside. There's no need to not grade him pretty high, whether an A or a B, and it may be a stretch. And I didn't even grade Chase Young this high. I graded him as an A. But because of the fact that they got a steal in the 4th round, I'm going to say A+.
I wouldn't say A+. I'm having a hard time giving him an A-, so I'd probably settle on like a good B+, if not a B. Like maybe it's the room to develop. Like I say a B with room to develop. I think he could turn into an A- or an A+. I really hope it does. But it's just leaving that room to develop is what I'm just going to put that grade there on him for.
I've just got a feeling, man, just with the way McLaurin kind of, jumped in there and played well last year, I just got a feeling this guy's going to make a splash too. And if they've got, them lined up on opposite sides, you have Trey Quinn in the slot, and then you've got tight ends that could potentially block and help the line out. If Moss happens to work out as that undrafted free agent and be the blocking tight end that they've needed since Chris Cooley left, or since Chris Cooley was actually healthy before he got hurt and then left, the team hasn't had a really true good blocking tight end because Jordan Reed, he wasn't consistent because he was always getting hurt or concussions based stuff. So, it's been a while since they've had help with the offensive line in general between tight ends, but I feel like Gandy Golden could make a splash, and this may be a homer pick. I don't know, but I'm going with A+ for Gandy Golden. So I'll settle for that, and everybody can attack me later if it doesn't work out, but I'm going with A+. Speaking about players in the draft, that's the first 4 picks that we've covered, and we're halfway through at this point. And now since out of those 4 picks, we've had 3 in a row that were offensive picks. And for the first pick in the 5th round that they had, because they had 2 picks in the 5th round, they take an offensive lineman who primarily played center, but you can play him at guard from San Diego State, Keith Ishmael. What are your thoughts on them drafting another offensive lineman, this far into the draft?
He's a pretty athletic center. He's not too big. He's a pretty good size, about 6'3", just under 310. He measures good with hands and arm length. Has some pretty good athleticism as far as pull blocking and recovery. Just another one where it's he had shoulder surgery last year, so that's something to look out to, especially with an offensive lineman. Their arms are in constant motion, so whether that shoulder is good, I forgot which one he had the surgery on. Just really locking up the blocks and being able to sustain them consistently is what I would be worried about with him. Because he's, like I said, he's not undersized, but he's definitely on the smaller size for like a lineman that at least that I would want. But he has potential. Of course, it's just a lot with these rookies is just getting them in there with the right mindset and the right coaching. And I think this is another one of those guys that could potentially be a starter, but he's going to start up as a pretty good backup. And he's going to get probably a lot of playing time on that left side if he doesn't get the center spot or even backup center spot. He's going to get a lot of opportunities to play, especially in the preseason too, if there is a preseason, which I really hope there is.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, because all these players, veterans and rookies, need it. But I mean, with Ishmael, you've got decent, like you said, he could be a pretty decent backup at first, and we'll see how it goes in the future. But he's a very capable option as a pull blocker. He's got pretty decent footwork from what I've seen in the highlights that I've seen of him. So, he doesn't have as strong as an upside as like Sadiq Charles does with the earlier pick in the draft. But, I feel like it was a pretty decent pick that was one that they need to make because like you talked about earlier, you said this team definitely needed to make upgrades on the offensive line. They've been needing it for a while. So it was a smart pick for Ron Rivera and this coaching staff overall. As far as a grade for it, I can't really grade it, but so high. I would have to say a solid C for this pick. And that's just my opinion.
I'd agree with you. I'd give them the same. It's just, they needed the extra backup, I would say, at the position that they got him. And, the grade could get better if we, redo this draft and regrade it later, depending on, how much time they get to reacquaint themselves with the actual offense and get some time during preseason. But for sure, I would definitely agree with a C plus. Not a C plus, but I would definitely agree with a C grade as far as what to give them right now, but with the potential to get better.
They were busy with multiple round picks this year. In the 5th round, they also had another pick, a guy that one of our insiders who's a big Michigan fan, LaMonte Thomas, will be, very, very insightful on this. Could give us some, pointers on how this guy played. But in the 5th round, with the 162nd overall pick, only 6 picks later from Ishmael, they take a linebacker. And they take Khaleke Hudson, out of Michigan with that 5th round pick. What are your thoughts on him there?
I am not high on this pick, so to say. This is probably going to be one of my lowest graded picks out of this whole thing. To kind of preview that part of the forecast, he played that hybrid safety linebacker position at Michigan. I don't know if he was well built for it, though, because, you look at guys that did that recently in Jaleel Peppers, he just flew all over the freaking field at Michigan when he was doing that hybrid linebacker safety position. I don't see much of that in him. I think he's a little undersized, just a little bit, 5'11", 220, low end of 220s. I just didn't see enough to get me excited about that. But again, with them switching, their complete defense, they haven't run a 4-3 in DC in freaking 10 plus years. They would need, someone to fill up some spots. So whether he's going to play, he'd fit in an outside linebacker if he makes the team. But whether he makes the team, period, I don't know. He got lost in some running game sometimes. If you look at the film with him against the Army, he got just washed out completely by Army's running game. But it's hard for people not to get washed out by that running game. But it's just whether he can show up in the actual defense in the playmaking spots that they need him at.
I mean, and from what I saw, basically everything you said from the footage that I saw of him, very similar of a take from what I have. The only difference that I would say to at least give him some props here is on special teams when, when Michigan would punt, he's got a pretty good burst when it comes to punt blocking, when he's blocking for the punter. I'll give him that. Is that good enough to make a professional football team? I don't think so. So hopefully he's been working during this shutdown, on himself, trying to figure out different ways that he can improve himself during this type of weird time that we've had as a nation, to where he can come in and make some type of impact to, like you said, just make the team, or even if not the team his first year, the practice squad, just so he can continue to get reps as a football player and improve on his craft. My grade for him would probably be a C minus. I don't see it being any better than that. I'm going to give him a C minus on this one.
I would agree, but I would kind of give him 2 different grades. As an actual linebacker, I'd give him a C minus, but you bring something else up there that I kind of completely forgot. Is just the special teams ability. It's just as a special teams player, I'd give him probably at least an A minus, just because his aggressiveness on there. And I personally have seen someone rise up from special teams to be an actual starter, because that's exactly what I saw as a Giants fan with Victor Cruz and David Tyree work their way up from special teams, and they worked their way up to starting spots with the Giants offense that won Super Bowls. So
at least Victor Cruz had a lot better of an upside than David Tyree. David Tyree is mainly known for that catch in the Super Bowl, which he'll never live that down, which that's a great way to be remembered. But Victor Cruz was a lot more successful than David Tyree. But I'll still take that ring if I was David Tyree, though.
That's what you got to do. You take the ring however you can get it. But it's just that same mentality of just, I may not be on the actual team, so to say. I may be on special teams, but a lot of people you can't forget. And I always go to Frank Beamer when I think about this at Virginia Tech. You can't forget special teams. Special teams is just as big as anything else in the game of football. Because if you can't have, people that can't tack on kickoffs, you're going to be giving up a lot of points there. Giving up great field position. You can't have, a kicker or a punter who can, make a simple field goal or, do a good coffin kick every once in a while, coffin punt. You're going to be dead to rights. So special teams is just as important as getting the offense and defense straight. And I feel like I'm saying that just out of random coincidence since the Giants just hired a special teams coordinator as the new head coach. I'm so sorry.
So I know you were kind of torn. I know you're kind of torn, and you had to give him 2 grades. But if you had to give him just an overall grade as just the team itself picking him, what would you give him? Because I give the Redskins a C- for picking him. If you had to take everything you just said and give him just 1 solid grade for overall, what would your opinion be for him for this pick?
I think it's at least a C+, because that special teams is just something I can't ignore that.
Okay.
I just really can't.
I can deal with that. That's not bad. And that's 2 rounds in a row now that the Redskins in the 4th and 5th round where they had 2 picks, in each of those rounds in the draft. They didn't have any picks in the 6th round, but they did have 2 picks in the 7th round. So this is the third round that they've had in this draft where they've had 2 picks. So they get 6 overall picks between the last 4 rounds. And in the 7th round for the 216 overall pick, they take safety Cameron Curl out of Arkansas. And, with it being this late in the draft, with it being a 7th round pick, I couldn't really grade it so high either, but I was still kind of fair in my grading scale for this guy. I gave him a C. He's got a lot of upside. He was a 3-year starter coming off of his best season altogether. I mean, he's got a smooth approach when it comes to backpedaling. He reads combinations pretty well, and with everything that I saw as far as his highlights goes, I felt like I should at least give him a C. So as far as my late round picks, he was probably one of my higher graded picks, but I'm going to be solid with my C for the grade for him.
Cameron Crowe, I don't know, like as a safety, I don't know, because I've seen a lot of, not just us. I've seen other people projecting, him as maybe as his better chance to make the team as a cornerback. Because, you draft him as a strong safety. That's almost being drafted as a strong safety right now as a Redskin is pretty much guaranteeing you're not going to start because Landon Collins is there. Mm-hmm. So then you look at where else he can play as free safety, maybe, but like Troy Apke and Sean Davis are there. So I think those are the 2 top guys for free safety. So then the only thing left is cornerback on that back end. And with him, I saw he was very susceptible, I guess is the word I'm looking for, on double moves. He can get beat by a pretty decent double move guy. Like a guy like Amari Cooper could shred him because his route running is amazing. So you still got to deal with him in the division. But like also with the ability to help in the run game, I like a safety or a DB who can help with that. I don't see much potential there too. And then another thing I'd knock him on is just his ability to cover from the slot. Whether, he can cover that special weapon guy from the slot, because a lot of the times if he's playing safety, that's kind of what a safety has to do, is cover that slot weapon there. Like mm-hmm. a good Wes Welker or a good Amendola, a good Edelman before he became the starter up in New England when he was still a slot guy. So, like, his ability to cover there isn't the best either. So, like, myself, I'd give him a C-, but it's just because of I don't think they needed him as much as a safety, and you're already going to move him to cornerback, which I think almost lessens his chance to make the team, really. So he's kind of, but to me, he's probably like a C- and with a chance to be like a 3rd or 4th if he got lucky cornerback on the team.
Okay, I can deal with that. That's a pretty good solid presumption. And I mean, in the 7th round, like we're talking about, they did have 2 picks, and for their final pick in this draft at the 229th spot, they take another defensive end / edge rusher, James Smith-Williams out of NC State. What were your thoughts on them taking him in this draft and as their last pick in the draft?
He's built a lot like like Chase Young. You look at his measurements, he's got the same size, 6'4", about 260. Big, decent size hands, good size arm length. It's just with him, he's still kind of, I wouldn't say growing, but I still think he's trying to figure out how to use his body almost in a way. Because when he went to NC State, I read something. He was like 196 pounds.
Yeah,
now
he was
260.
Yeah, he put on. I was going to say that with my take too. He put on 65 pounds during the years that he was at NC State. So you're right. He's still trying to figure out where he wants to be as far as size wise. So, I mean, if he can cut weight just as good as he put on weight, there's other positions they could find him at too.
I think like the weight he put on for the position he's playing is that edge rusher. Like I think that's great. And again, I would go back to what the same thing I say to Chase Young is rotation. Because, he's a defensive end. They're switching back to their 4-3. He's going to have his hand in the ground. It's just managing his weight and not putting on too much at a sense. And like I said, just figuring out how to use his body. Because he's a 21, 22-year-old kid that just ballooned 60 pounds within the last 4 years. Because he's a redshirt senior coming out of college. So I know he's still figuring out how to use his body that big. Because he's 6'4". I think he was still about the same height. He maybe grew an inch or two during his years in college. But just his waist got a lot bigger and his chest got a lot bigger. So it's just I know he's still trying to figure out how to use his body and how to put it in motion the right way. But I think with who he's with Del Rio coaching him at top, and then Ron Rivera on top of that, and then the other guys he's got with him, again, it goes to the veteran presence of guys like Kerrigan, Ioannidis has been there for a couple of years, and Jonathan Allen, how to use his body at the D line and where to put his hands up on the tackles and the guards. As far as, trying to get the pass rush and, develop his own swim move, his power rush move and all that, I think he'll have the tutoring. It's whether he can actually, figure it out in his head and how to use his body at the same time. And, that's, again, it's just the coaching. A lot of it relies on coaching. But I think they got a lot of good coaching there in D.C.
They've had that old joke for a long time for people who go to college putting on the freshman 15. The guy we just talked about put on the freshman 15 all 4 years.
He really did. The freshman 15 times 4.
Yeah. Yeah, he definitely crushed it. He definitely crushed the groceries.
He definitely did. He was definitely going back a couple times at the lunch table for a couple extra trays.
For seconds, yep.
He put it on well. I'll say that. He looks pretty decent for his size.
But given the fact that our guy's good at gaining weight and getting ready to play a position, I got to give him a C. I got to give the Redskins a C for picking him up with their last pick in the draft, with their 8th pick that they had overall in the entire draft. I'll give him a C for this one.
I'd agree. Because like I said, it's the potential he has and just the rotation that they're trying to build at defensive end and line. Period. It's a C+ for where they got him, especially with their last pick of the draft.
Overall, now that we've talked about, all 8 picks that the team has had in the entire draft, if you were to grade the Redskins now for their entire draft, how much of a grade, or how much could you critique it, and what type of grade could you give them for their overall draft picks that they've had this year in the 2020 draft?
It's a tricky one. I think they had a very good draft, better than I almost thought that they could have.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that they missed on a couple of areas. I think they might have snuck away with, and I'm going ahead. They might have snuck away with a good undraft signee with Moss. Mm-hmm. I think they could have drafted a tight end in that draft to get some talent there. Then again, there wasn't that much talent there at tight end. I think they could have drafted, a cornerback earlier to shore up the outside. But then again, you got Kendall Fuller coming. You got Kendall Fuller in there. You got
they picked up Aaron Colvin. They picked up Colvin. Yep,
they did. So you could have picked up some talent there. But for what they got, And just for the monster of a talent that Chase Young is, and the fact that they're switching back to a 4-3, which means Chase Young will get so many opportunities to just do what he does and just maul quarterbacks. And I hate the fact that he's going to probably do that to Danny Dimes so many times. But overall, I'd give their draft at least a solid B plus probably. But I say that with the potential to get better because they have the pieces to form a rotation to be a formidable defense for the next at least 5 or 10 years if they can recognize the talent and coach them up the right way.
I was going to say a solid B because when you factor in all the other grades that we've given, we've really only had 2 really high grades, and that's with Gandy Golden and, of course, Young. And then we did grade, a Gibson kind of high up there too. It is a high average pick, in the Bs. But then when you factor their final 6 picks that they had, their final 5 picks that they had after those picks, I'll give them a B, a solid B, like you were talking about. You went with the B plus with your final take on that. I'll go with a B for now until we see how it goes. But definitely, Young was the guy that they had to take. That was the no-brainer, like you said earlier. Like they would have been crucified in the media had they not taken him with that second pick. Had they traded it away, they would have had to have gotten so much capital in order to make that even make sense to pass up on a Chase Young, because this is a type of defensive player they've been looking for quite some time.
Now, when you say that, like if they trade away from that second round pick, someone's trading away their franchise for the next 3 years, even if they try to do that to get Chase Young. And in a situation where they would have, hypothetically, if they trade back, I would hope they wouldn't have traded as far back as maybe like 6 or 7, so they can still get someone like Isaiah Simmons. I think that would be the next best player that they could have gotten on defense if they were trying to go defense first, or Okudah, the guy who went right after him to Detroit. But I personally, I'm funny about drafting, but like I think not having a second round pick in this draft didn't hurt them as much as I thought it would. Like, of course, I would have, perfectly, you would have liked to have the first 3 picks, and then, maybe a couple other chunk picks in the 3rd or 4th round. Your make your money picks, your win your Super Bowl picks, your rotation picks. But that second round pick, and then going straight to the 3rd round, I thought on paper, you might think it might hurt them, but it really didn't, because I think they played it right and they played it smart, drafting, potential to do well in DC under Rivera.
Yeah, that's a good fair take on that. And so overall, we definitely agree on the fact that they had a killer draft this year. And like you said, with not having that second round pick, it was kind of iffy when it all started. We didn't know which way it would go. But then, after those 3 days of drafting took place, and we know the ending result now, it's fair to say they did well. And it's just only a matter of time, hopefully, that before we see OTAs and training camp, they can show us on the field, how these guys will actually produce. So, only time will tell. And until then, we got to stay tuned, just like everything else going on in the nation. But for that, guys, that is the NFL draft recap for the Washington Redskins for their 2020 draft. For the guy on my left here, Russ Taliaferro, thank you again for joining the podcast, and look forward to many more times of talking about this team in the future on this podcast with you. So thank you as always for joining in, and you guys stay safe out there.
Peace. Wish it could have been a draft party this year.
I know. I was talking about that with somebody else not too long ago. I was like, man, me and my guy Russ would have probably gone up there again, gotten some more free cold ones, seen Santana Moss again, been right up there at the stage. It would have been great. And I was really excited for that. And then COVID-19 hits, and it messed up everybody's plans for not just the draft party, but so much other things. Well, there you have it, guys. That concludes part 1 of episode 2 for the Hail to the Red Zone podcast. Stay tuned, as tomorrow we'll be releasing part 2 of this episode, which will feature Russ Taliaferro, Rob Johnson, Darrell Owens, and myself as we break down the rest of the current moves for the Washington Redskins leading up to this point, and we will discuss them tomorrow, May 20th, on part 2. Thank you, as always, for tuning in.
Legacy Maker, the All Sports Network. Brought to you in part by DWillingMedia.com.